How does trauma impact your health, which in turn impacts your odds of getting cancer? Well, I just turned 56 a few months ago, and I thought I had a pretty healthy life. You would think I was, former marathoner. Well, that was 20 years ago, but I've done at least 4. And I ate fairly well. I did acknowledge I was a chocoholic, and I did use sugar and coffee too much. But the point was, I never thought I had capital T trauma, big T trauma. I just had little trauma, and I didn't think the past was haunting me. But now, of course, that I have the big C, cancer, and not just cancer, not breast cancer like 80, all other women seem to get. No. God has a good sense of humor. As a non-smoker, I got stage 4 lung cancer. I did not have that on my bingo card for 2026. Holy moly. How did I end up with this awful, heinous, terminal, incurable, terrifying disease? I've had to do a lot of inner work, and I'm still doing it. It's inner. But I realized, I may not have a big T trauma. I thankfully wasn't ever physically or sexually abused. I didn't live through, war. I'm not didn't lose a parent, not a war refugee, all those heinous things that some kids have to live through. Some kids currently are living through. Geez Louise, I never thought the day would come when I'd be living in a live stream genocide. But here we are. That's trauma for sure. I didn't have any of that. But I've taken a step back, and I've had to be more honest, and I've said to myself, Sherry, you may not have had a big T trauma, but you've had lots of little T traumas. And the little T traumas, they've been stacking up, and they stacked up, and at some point the tower tumbles over. So I thought I would take some time to think about, what are those things that have been holding me back, my little T's? And, first of all, this is something I've never put on film, and partly to protect the living. But this video series is for me, so I gotta protect myself so I can keep on living. I come from a family with an addictive father, alcoholic. He's apparently been sober for a couple of years, but that doesn't discount the many years he would use alcohol to self-soothe. He himself came from a troubled childhood, and that's what I put it down to. He did the best he could. He has done the best he can. He's still a good dad in his respective ways, but he had his own trauma, and one of his ways to self-regulate and self-soothe was through alcohol. He was a smoker, but only briefly. I don't blame that for my secondhand smoke by any means. But having a parent with it's not the alcohol, it's the side effects, a very volatile personality. Oh, it was hard. They're actually, when I think about my childhood, not the formative years, not the 0 to 6, but definitely the later years. Ironically, the more successful he became, the worse the trauma became, the worse the anger and the fear became. There was a lot of fear in my household. I think the best way, at least fear for me, I don't know if my mother and younger brother felt the same way, but the best way for me to describe it is, I remember being a young adult, maybe 17, 18, and realizing, my parents haven't fought for nearly 2 weeks. That's longer than normal. It usually is every week and a half. Brace myself because it's coming. Like that was the fear. And of course, I really don't think about, I really don't think about the past. I don't blame my parents for my cancer. I definitely don't blame them for any wrongs or bad deeds that have happened in my life, because it's the past. But I realize with hindsight, living with that fear, that fight or flight, has followed me. It's followed me. So here we are. Little T, alcoholic parent, pretty common. A much smaller little T is a mother who maybe was, I wouldn't call her emotionally absent, but maybe not the emotional connection that I needed. She, you know, loved me and would hug me, but not the kind of mom who was like, there was like no pity party in my family. If you're looking for pity, that's not the family. Like and not that pity is a good thing, but I guess more about soothing and empathy. That's not her strong suit. And especially where there's some areas in my life where I needed more support, which is another little T trauma I'll get to. She just was kind of clueless. But even now that I'm older, like even now that I have cancer, this was just a week ago, I commented how my body is aged. Like by 20 years, I have the body. I have a grandma bod, and you know, I'm still middle age, north of middle age. Way too young to be a grandma. My daughters are still underage for even sexual activity, so being a grandma is not on my my bucket list for sure. And you know, my mom's comment to me was, "Yeah, well, look," kind of basically like, "Yeah, look at me." But like, you are 20 years older. You are a grandma. You should have a grandma bod. Like, there's just, if you want to be the center of attention, even when you literally have terminal cancer, the attitude will be like, oh, shut up. Like, just, it's not just about you. What about me? And it's hard for me to articulate that because I don't think she knows that, but she was the kind of parent that literally, when I left home and I'd be excited to phone her, I'm old enough back then, it was Skype versus WhatsApp. But like, she would literally put me on like a 30-minute timer. She didn't have the wind-up clock, but like I could see her glancing at her watch as we got closer. And I was so excited to talk to her, and I really, like, I miss my mom. And, you know, I should mention she was at work, but she's self-employed. So, you know, to this day, 30-minute timer. So parenting, you know, maybe I need a different kind of parents. As I've gotten older, I realized, maybe because I've heard this word recently, empath, and I'm like, what the heck is an empath? And I've realized I don't check all the boxes, but I am more empathetic leaning. Is that a word? So I think I would have done better with more nurturing instead of the fear. The other little T trauma is like, I knew my brother was the preferred child, and I didn't really think about this, but I was listening to or heard about the book by Anita, I forget her last name, but she wrote the book Dying to Be Me. She's a miracle cancer survivor, radical remission, but she's very explicit how in her culture's Indian, mine's not, but in her culture, similar to what I experienced. Having said that, I think on both sides of my parents, who neither are Indian themselves, they're not South Asian, we are not South Asian, boys are preferred, boys are put on a pedestal, and my brother was no exception. I don't think he was always demonstrably preferred versus me. My mother was actually pretty good, because she herself dealt with that when she was a kid in her family. But, you know, you kind of know when you know. And, you know, even my brother, ironically, even he knew he was preferred. Losing my water bottle. Because he made a comment to me when he was a kid. He literally said, I'm something like, I'm loved more than you, or I'm preferred more than you, or I'm better than you because of, you know, fill in the blank. So, yeah. Not being the favorite child. And when I look back, there probably are reasons for it. You know, oh, gotta let the motorcycle pass. My parents got married very, very young because my mother was pregnant with me. So I'm gonna guess, in all fairness, some of that trauma was in vitro, in the embryo. My mom marrying my dad because she was pregnant was a biggie. And this leads to my next little tea. My mom and my dad are not the same race. My dad is black, my mother is white. And this is the early 70s, where this wasn't as common as like Drake or Olivia Dean. So being mixed race has actually been a really defining feature of my life. And it just made things awkward, especially because I have a very, you know, as I say, I jokingly say I look third world, but people they think I'm Egyptian, I'm Hispanic, I'm, you know, Middle Eastern. It depends where I am. If I'm in Brazil, I'm Brazilian. If I'm, you know, I've not been to the Middle East, but I'm sure, you know, it would be the same thing. People now even come up to me in like Toronto and speak Spanish, and I'm like, sorry, no comprende or whatever. So I'm honored. It's a privilege, but it's not my culture. And I could be mistaken for South Asian. In fact, I think most of my friends are South Asian, or because even though I don't have the same culture identity, I probably can like be incognito. But I'll quote someone else. I forget her name. I have to look her up. She's a South African writer who wrote a great quote, and it literally was something like, being mixed race is like being a well-dressed homeless person. People admire you. Some people even want to get with you, but you really have no place to call home. And yeah, you know, I'm not the cutest mixed race person. I don't have the, you know, I don't have the Halle Berry face, the Olivia Dean body. I have a cancer bod now. I got a grandma bod, so I'm finally skinny, but unfortunately went a little bit too far. The point to say is, back to being mixed race. I've learned to be a chameleon all my life, and it's a bit tiring. And even when people are black, they don't think I'm black, and if they're mixed race, I don't maybe look mixed race how it's expected. So it's just made me kind of go inwards and stop just like trying to make friends sometimes, and just, even though I'm actually a really friendly person, I think it was just easier to reject people before they could reject me. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be in an interracial relationship or marriage, or your kids will grow up messed up. I guess it worked out for Barack Obama. He was pretty powerful. He was also a warmonger. I've changed my mind on him, like all politicians. But it's just to say, you do need to be more conscientious if you raise kids who are mixed race. Back to my parents. I mean, it's not fair to blame my mom for this. She's not the person of color. But my dad's pretty clueless, and he's just not that kind of dad at the best of times. I never even had a black doll or a doll of color. I can't tell you how much that bothered me. So, you know, there are differences, and I think parents are more aware these days. Sometimes I think they go a bit too far. They're a bit too goofy. I didn't need to celebrate Kwanzaa, never did, and I'm fine not doing that. But, you know, you can't live in a vacuum and tell your kid you don't see color, because people do see color. They do see race, and if anything else is it's false. It's not, it's BSE, and it's living in a bubble, and we don't live in a bubble. There are 9 million of us on the planet. We need to have ways to interact, get along, and feel positive in those interactions. Part of the little T trauma is something I actually kind of proud of, but I realize it just adds to the feeling of weirdness. Is, you know, when I was growing up, my parents were more working class. They went to universities, mature students, and our life changed for the better economically. I did remember, I was self-aware enough as a teenager that it changed better economically, but it got worse emotionally. Again, my dad's stress would lead to more alcohol abuse, and I was often the victim of it, more so than my brother or my mom. It was actually quite bad sometimes. Once I actually tried to overdose on pills. We had no pills in the medicine cabinet, but I tried. Well, I didn't actually take any pills, and weren't enough. And I'm really not that kind of person. Life is a gift, especially now. I have terminal cancer. Life is a gift, but that was a hard day, evening of being bullied by my dad, while my mother and my brother were really ineffective at protecting me. But you know, again, going back to being a fish out of water, I'd gone from being middle class to, or like lower middle class to, I wouldn't say upper middle class, but solidly middle class. You know, I have a good degree, I have an MBA, I had good jobs, Fortune 500 brands, the biggest brands in the world, pre-tech era, the brands we used to admire like Coca-Cola and Kraft, that used to be brands that I would give to my kids. Now, of course, I don't, or wouldn't advise you do either. But those were great jobs for me. Automotive, you know, Unilever, you name it. And, you know, being a bit geeky, a bit nerdy, a bit more like I'm a learner for life. When people around me, maybe if I wanted to hang out with black people, they weren't always like that. You know, meanwhile, I have no rhythm. I have no rhythm and no choreography, so you can tell I'm not fully Nubian. I'm not fully black. Water bottle. And I guess the last little T is always feeling awkward in my body physically, not just intellectually, feeling different and weird and looking different, even sounding different. You know, when I moved to England with my family at age 13, I sounded different, right? My Canadian accent was different. I lived in the Caribbean as a kid for a year and a half. In my early years, like 7 to 9 and a half or so, and like then I started to develop a Caribbean accent, and then I went back to Canada. So I'm used to like sounding different, looking different. But I've always just felt different because even though I had a normal sized body, it wasn't easy shopping for clothes. And I know this sounds silly. If you're female, you'll understand this. If you're a female who's always struggled with her weight, you'll understand this. Now I don't struggle. If you see me now, look at me. I'm like bone thin. That's not natural. That's the cancer. I didn't know it would happen so quickly and so ferociously. I miss my pleasant plumpness. I guess I'm lucky I always had a heavy set face because it's not as obvious in my face, but trust me, I got some grandma bod bones jutting out, and I was just normal size, but you know, definitely not obese, definitely not even overweight, a little bit pleasantly plump during those awkward teenage years, when everything's goofy, you know, even like Angelina Jolie looked awkward during those years. But the point to say is, like, I've just never really felt comfortable in my body either, right? I felt fat, short, dumpy. I even had scars from a horrific accident when I was a kid in the Caribbean. I'm probably one of the few people on the planet who was run through a sliding glass door. What a moron. I have the scars to prove it. So, you know, I didn't like my legs anyway, but now I definitely didn't want to show them off because darker skin like mine tends to get keloids, which are raised scars. They're quite unattractive. I've had people like grimace at my legs. I mean, they're not that horrifying. She was quite rude, but you get the message, right? It was another reason to cover my body. Now I feel like I'm covering up to hide my skinny frailty because I love food. I'll never be anorexic. On my deathbed, I'll be like, pass the chocolates. But yeah, I hated shopping for clothes with my mom. It was really embarrassing and humiliating. And again, she's not empathetic. And like, you know, never blame your child if the clothes don't fit. It's not your child's fault that the damn clothes on the rack don't fit. Maybe it's the manufacturer of the clothes, right? Maybe my hair isn't meant to be using a fine-tooth comb. Maybe my hair would be better cut by someone else with curly hair. You know, I've literally been brought to hair salons where they literally grimaced at my hair. They were so horrified by my natural curls, and behind my mother's back they were mocking me. It was horrible. That's my childhood, and those are all little T's, but the little T's have stacked up. Growing up an abusive, alcoholic, addictive father, emotionally unavailable and sadly sometimes clueless mother, not being the preferred child, not liking my body, feeling bad about my body, not liking my hair. I won't even mention the chronic acne and braces and the glasses. I'm okay with the glasses now, but goodness gracious, I was a hot mess. It's amazing I've gone this long, this far, before the cancer caught up to me. Luckily, I actually think I'm a pretty happy person. I'm very blessed. Don't ignore your little T traumas. I used to think they weren't important, and now I realize they're not entirely why I'm with this terminal cancer diagnosis, but I realize they've compounded over time. They've stacked up, and not just stacked up, but they've compounded like bad interest over time. So deal with them early, deal with them positively, but deal with them so that you can live a long, healthy life. You deserve it. I deserve it. We deserve it. Stay well.